So basically, Neal, what the hell is going on with President Trump? And isn't this election tampering? I mean, and please explain it for people who don't necessarily have a law degree and didn't work at the Justice Department.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, real honor to be here with you. Happy New Year. I hope you and John have all the happiness this year and health, and all of your viewers. And your viewers are amazing. They've all come over, a lot of them come over to watch Courtside every night on Instagram. They often shout out you. Thank you.
You provide a real service because, I mean, all this stuff is coming fast and furiously. It's hard for people. I didn't go to law school. And it's really, you guys want me to turn the comments off? Okay, let me see if I can do that. I don't mind. You know, sometimes they're great and sometimes they're not so great. Anyway, I'm going to turn off the comments. Hold on, turn off commenting. Okay, sorry, everybody. So let's get straight to the nitty gritty of this. I mean, is it illegal what Donald Trump tried to do? He's trying to coerce Georgia election officials, including the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who's been getting kudos for not, you know, succumbing to that pressure, although other people say, hey, that's his job after all. But is that a criminal offense? And if not, why isn't it?
Yeah, it sure looks like it is potentially criminal, probably likely criminal. There are a bunch of caveats that I'll talk about in a minute. So, the story begins with Trump, like that boyfriend you have or that ex in high school who called you all the time. Like, that's what Trump was doing to Raffensperger, this Georgia Secretary of State. He called him 18 times last week. And finally, they connected on Saturday. But Raffensperger was smart enough, and there's some new details in Politico today about this tape. Basically, he was smart enough to say, Trump lied about our last conversation to the media, so I'm going to tape it. And he helped.
Is one party taping of a conversation legal in the state of Georgia? Because it varies from state to state, right?
Right. It varies from state to state. I don't know the law in Georgia, but it's also a public official. And so, there's some arguments for public taping here, which would apply even if there's normally a two-party consent. Many states are one party. So I suspect that it's fine, the actual taping of the call. But that's certainly the least of the legal problems that happened as a result, which is why it was so funny. You saw these Republican politicians last night saying, oh, how disrespectful to the president to tape him. And I'm like, man, if we're going to start with disrespect and the word president, I think we have a long list before we get to taping the president.
No, but I'm curious because I wondered if it would be admissible if there were legal proceedings. But don't worry, you're right. Yeah. Get to the real issue here.
Yeah, and there'll be a bunch of exceptions to make it admissible, I suspect, in court. So if this comes to it. So basically, Trump said to the Secretary of State, find me 11,780 votes, which is one more vote than he said he needed in order to flip the state of Georgia. Now, mind you, flipping the state of Georgia alone wouldn't get Trump what he needs. The electoral count is Vice President Biden has 306 votes, and he only needs 270. Georgia only has 16. So even if you somehow knocked that out, which of course Trump couldn't do, he'd still be at 290. So you got to wonder, what is this harebrained?
Last night, you talked about him kind of going state to state, like, what did you describe him as, a Girl Scout knocking on doors?
Like a mafia-run Girl Scout knocking door to door to try and shake down people and their votes. And certainly I suspect that the Georgia calls are not the only calls. They may be the only tapes that we know of right now, but, this is the way I think Trump operates, but in any event, there's federal and state laws that prohibit someone from interfering with a federal election when it's carried out by the states. So there's an express statute on that for good reason. You think that's kind of the core of what democracy is about, that if you have an election for federal office and it's carried out at the state level, you can't go and mess with it. And here, that's really what President Trump was trying to do, which is to throw out certain votes in Fulton County, add other votes that somehow he's hoping that could be found somewhere. And ultimately, the upshot of all that is to disenfranchise the voters in Georgia who made a certain decision. And this is one piece of a strategy that the Republican Party has adopted more generally, which is oh, you voted by mail because you were afraid of coronavirus? Oh, your votes don't count. Or you voted too late in the day, your votes don't count. Or now, for the last 2 months, it's, oh, there's vote fraud and things like that, which they've never been able to actually substantiate. And indeed, that the FBI has looked at, the Attorney General Bill Barr has looked at, 15, it's actually 61 different courts have looked at right now and rejected. So, these claims have lost everywhere, but nonetheless, they keep on making them. And the goal here is to make it somewhere successful so they could disenfranchise you and me, the greatest disenfranchisement in American history. They want to throw out over 140 million votes.
Got it. But I want to know, what can they do about this? What does our legal system allow us, or, the criminal justice system, to actually do if an official at this level, isn't this called election tampering? I mean,
yes, it's also called a felony. And so there's two buckets of things that can be done. One is criminal prosecution at both the federal and the state level. There are federal crimes and state crimes. The state crimes here are quite easy. Like Georgia has a statute about solicitation, encouraging someone to commit a crime, which sure seems like what Trump was doing. And then there's federal statutes, as I said, that prohibit election interference and the like. Both of those are available. The federal one is prosecuted by the United States Justice Department, which for the last 4 years has basically coddled and protected Donald Trump. That is not the way the Justice Department has historically operated. They're just as tough on presidents of their party.
Sorry to interrupt, but even if this Justice Department doesn't prosecute, right? Does that mean that the incoming Justice Department couldn't prosecute?
Not at all. The statute of limitations is far longer than 16 days. So absolutely, on January 20th, I very much expect an investigation to begin. Now, the investigation actually might have begun today, Katie, because actually the federal Justice Department official in the Northern District of Georgia suddenly resigned, all of a sudden today. We don't know the story yet, but undoubtedly we will. I suspect that there was pressure to open an investigation, and I don't know where he stood or the acting Attorney General, Jeffrey Rosen, stood.
Sounds like he was refusing.
We don't know. Refusing, or maybe wanted to carry it out, and the main justice and the acting Attorney General tried to stop him. We don't know yet, but that's going to be part of the story. Undoubtedly, in 16 days, the new Justice Department can pick up this investigation. Now, what President Trump has one card left to play against that, which is the pardon clause. He could try and give a self-pardon.
Neal, before we get to the pardon, though, there are state laws that were potentially broken and federal laws. So we're talking about the Justice Department prosecuting the federal, any kind of federal laws that were broken, and then the state of Georgia carrying out its own investigation and prosecution process.
Right, and actually there's another layer to it, which is the county. So Fulton County has already opened an investigation, a criminal investigation into what Donald Trump has done. And so you've got in those two entities, the state and local entities, the president's pardon is irrelevant to those. Those investigations can still continue. That's the genius of our founders. They thought, if you have a president who corrupts the federal justice system, we need to have a check and balance somewhere else to try and get after that corruption. And so that occurs at the state level.
Interesting. So what would be the crime at the state level, and what, if convicted, would be the penalty?
So the crime would be solicitation. I don't know what the punishment is in Georgia. It's often turns on the punishment for the underlying offense, so solicitation for election fraud. You'd look at the election fraud statute. My guess is it's between 2 and 5 years in prison, maybe potentially more than that. So you've got the criminal side on the one thing, and then the other half of this is the non-criminal side, the impeachment side. And that's not something I know a lot of people have an appetite for right now, impeaching Donald Trump again. But I just wrote a piece in the New York Times a couple hours ago making the case for it. And basically, the case for it is that our Constitution says in Article 1 that it's not just about removing people from office, but disqualifying them from future office holding. And nobody thinks impeachment can happen in 16 days, but an inquiry can start. And It can continue in the House and then in the Senate. And the Senate may be newly constituted, depending on what happens in Georgia tomorrow. You also have Romney and people like that who may come forth and actually vote with the Democrats. And last time, Mitch McConnell was able to prevent a trial in the Senate because he had a majority. It's not clear to me he'll have a majority next time.
Dumb question, Neal. So even if the president isn't the president anymore, so you're saying that a former president can be impeached?
Right. Not a dumb question at all. Scholars have written a large number of articles on this question. I think the best evidence that Katyal at Yale and a lot of others have said is absolutely a former president can be impeached in order to disqualify him from future office holding. And it makes a lot of sense because what you wouldn't want to have is a president who's effectively unimpeachable in the lame duck. I mean, imagine Donald Trump said, you know, this is an example we used in the op-ed today. Imagine Donald Trump said, I'm mad about this electoral college stuff. If Pence doesn't give me the presidency, I'm going to nuke Iran or attack Iran or something like that. You got to have some remedy to deal with that, and you won't necessarily be able to carry it out all within the waning days of a presidential term.
But the fact of the matter is these things have occurred while he is still president.
Absolutely.
Right?
And so, but in, you know, and so that, and just to go back to your earlier question about criminal indictments, Trump has been protected for 4 years because a sitting president can't be indicted, at least at the federal level, under a Justice Department opinion written in 1973. It's an opinion I disagree with, but that's what Barr used to protect him from Mueller. He's not going to be a sitting president much longer, and so any crimes he committed in office, fully prosecutable once he leaves office.
Except if he pardons himself, Neal. So I think everybody knows that this has been swirling around. Will he or won't he pardon himself? And if he does, will it stick? And if he does that prevent him from being prosecuted for some of these activities?
Right. So it's not an interesting question. Will he pardon himself? He's of course going to pardon himself. This is a guy who pardons any of his friends, and his best friend is, of course, himself.
Well,
so
will he or won't he, but can he?
Exactly. So that has never been tested in American law. The same Justice Department in 1973 that wrote that opinion saying a sitting president can't be indicted wrote a separate opinion saying a sitting president can't pardon himself. And the idea goes all the way back to 1610, a case from England called Dr. Bonham's case, which says you can't be a judge in your own case. That's kind of the fundamental principle of what law is. And a self-pardon is exactly that. It's saying, I am adjudicating for myself and declaring myself innocent. And so as a result, I think the best way, really this very serious way to scholarly evidence is on the side that a president can't pardon himself. He'll try, but if the Justice Department in the new administration investigates, concludes a crime has been committed, absolutely they should test any sort of pardon by Donald Trump. If anything, it just makes him look more guilty.
All right, so, but he will, and who knows if it'll stick. But the fact of the matter is what you're saying is Georgia could proceed and he has no protection, pardon or no pardon.
Correct. Exactly.
Right.
So if I'm Donald Trump right now, this is really, very troubling in a way that, you could dismiss the Ukraine transcript. It was a transcript. Nobody got to really listen to the phone call and this and that. But you hear these words and they are chilling. He sounds like a mob boss. He does not sound like any normal person that you and I would associate with. Forget about being the leader of the free world.
Right. I mean, it is really stunning, but honestly, we're so inured to it. I didn't find it that shocking. It's stunning in terms of the principle of it, but in terms of the behavior, I wasn't that shocked.
Well, I guess, I was. And I guess the reason is it's not just that he said go find 11,780 votes, which is what I started your show with today. It's also that he said to the Secretary of State that he threatened them with criminal prosecution and said there'll be serious consequences if you don't find those votes. That to me, that is literally textbook abuse of power. If you ask the founders, if we could resurrect Madison and say, what did you mean when you used those words, abuse of power, in the Federalist Papers? It is exactly that. I'm going to prosecute you if you don't give me the election. My God.
Well, I just saw that he's going to offer a pardon to Devin Nunes. Oh, no, he's giving he's giving sorry.
The Congressional Medal of Freedom, which effectively is like a pardon, right? I mean, well, it means the same thing in Trump world,
He's giving billion honor to Devin Nunes, right?
Yes. As I tweeted out last night, Trump's anti-Midas touch continues. Everything he turns to, to do that to the Presidential Medal of Freedom, my God, to Devin Nunes. Speechless.
Well, didn't he give it to Rush Limbaugh too?
Oh yeah. And God knows who's next.
Okay. So before we go, because Neal, I know we don't have that much time, but I love hearing your explanation. Everybody, this is really important too, because on January 6th, this is when, gosh, I don't even know the right term of art, Neal, for this. This is when the election is basically certified by Congress, right? They basically say the election has happened. The new president is Joe Biden. And of course, now we have some people who are taking up Trump's cause on Capitol Hill. Some conservative Republicans are stepping forward to say they want to contest the election results. Mike, you wrote a piece with our other friend, John Monsky, in the New York Times over the weekend about this. So can you help people understand kind of what is happening on January 6th, how it won't make a bit of difference, even if people contest it, but what this symbolizes for the our democracy and the electoral process?
Okay, so here's what is supposed to happen and what's happened in every single presidential election since 1887 when the Electoral Count Act was written. On a certain date, this year it's specified as January 6th in the law, all of those electoral slates that have been sent up and certified by state governors come to Washington. And the vice president's job is to open the envelopes and hand the results to 4 designated tellers who are supposed to tabulate them. And then they announce that announces the next president. Now, if the members of the House and a member of the Senate disagree, they can file an objection. And then there can be 2 hours of debate on that particular objection. So this happened back in 2016. Maxine Waters thought that there was some voter fraud in Ohio. She didn't want to swing the election or anything away from Trump, but she objected to draw attention to it. And when she objected in the House, no members of the Senate agreed. The Republicans booed and laughed at her. Paul Ryan, who was the Speaker of the House, was laughing at this, saying it was anti-democratic and the like. So that's the way this has been treated in the rare circumstances there have ever been any objections. You now have Republicans trying to fight a 2-front war. Some are saying Vice President Pence can simply decide who the winner of the election is himself. That's frankly an insane proposition. It would mean that the 140 million, whatever number of votes, just don't count. And it's just up to Vice President Pence to decide. That's perhaps the most un-American thing imaginable. The other possibility, as Josh Hawley, a lawyer, is saying, is that basically they can raise objections and that into the way the counts are made, and that there'll be enough objections that you can disqualify those states or something like that. That has 0 chance of succeeding. Hawley doesn't have any new evidence. He has the same evidence that's been rejected by the FBI, by the Attorney General, by 60+ courts and the like. This is a joke through and through, and these people should be ashamed that they have assigned their name to such a thing. It really just shows the destruction of the Republican Party.
Do you think that Donald Trump's call to Brad Raffensperger will change some people's opinions about this by January 6th, which is...
Well, there's some speculation about that, like Tom Cotton, who generally votes with the kind of cuckoos in the party, actually came out after the audio tape leaked and said, I'm not joining this effort to try and overturn the election on January 6th. So whether, he is a smart person and maybe he actually came to that conclusion on the up and up, I sure hope so. You know, I mean, one of the most troubling things is just that we have to celebrate people for doing their job and like just saying, you know, this is ridiculous. But, you know, the idea that like Vice President Pence gets to decide the election, that's like the dude in the Oscars who opens envelopes and says, you know, supposed to just to read who won Best Picture and instead gets to pick the Best Picture. It's
Well,
crazy.
didn't Vice President Pence say something over the weekend where he was encouraging these Republicans to object to the election results, or am I dreaming?
Well, he did. You know, he did. You know, yesterday he issued a statement that said basically, yeah, I encourage Republicans to bring forth their concerns and the like. You know, which I think should doom him in the eyes of American history and in the eyes of the American electorate. What these people are doing.
Wait, I just lost you, Neal. I just lost your sound.
Oh, there we go.
There you
Okay.
go.
I was going to say, these people are trying to take your vote away as the American people. They're trying to say, I'm going to throw out these votes and decide who wins.
But why would Mike Pence encourage that? Does he just want to not fall out of favor with Donald Trump and with his base?
I can't speculate as to the guy, but he consistently is a disappointment in every way, shape, and form. I mean, if you take a dictionary and look up invertebrate, I think there's a picture of him.
So it sounds to me like, in closing, Neal, that Donald Trump, for whatever reason, is not going to be out of the news because, I don't know, in some perverse way, do you think he did this to stay in the spotlight? I know that sounds crazy, but psychologically, it's so beyond the pale. I don't think he understands the Constitution and our system of government. And I mean that in not a patronizing way. I just think it's factually accurate. But I don't know why he would comport himself this way, except for, you know, he has absolutely zero ethics.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he's a disaster through and through, and he certainly doesn't understand the Constitution. He thinks it's like the business that he inherited or something like that. He can run the way he wants to run. I do think it's very troubling. I can't speculate as to the psychological motivation, but I can speculate as to the consequence. I mean, you know, presidents are supposed to bring us together. You know, Lincoln said a house divided can't stand. And we've had a president who at every turn exploits the seams and divisions in our society. And at a time when we needed it the most, when our economy is really suffering for the poor and when coronavirus is ravaging us, this guy instead just cares about himself. Judd Apatow had an incredibly perceptive tweet last night. He said, you know, I never see Trump speak with passion about coronavirus and those dead the way he speaks about the stolen election results. And I think that just captured everything about this man in just 280 characters. It's not about you and me. It's just about what he can grab for himself.
That's a sad way to end this conversation, Neal. But
on a happy note, he's out in 16 days, and he is 100% out. I just want to make sure all your viewers understand this. We're hearing all this stuff about shenanigans on January 6th, tapes, this, that. No chance any of this is going to work. 100%, he's out of here.
Yeah, I guess what's disturbing as we wrap this up is, yes, he's out, but he still has, 74 million people who supported him. And I think trying to, and who still believe, I mean, what did we talk about a couple of conversations ago? The percentage of Republican voters in this country who believe with all their heart the election was rigged and there were, illegalities right and left when it came to voting. How do we convince those people that this is not true? And I think that's really one of the biggest challenges moving forward in terms of solving some of these intractable problems. How do we unite the country when such a huge percentage of people believe, and they're probably not bad people, but they're being fed and brainwashed that this is the case? How do we basically, deprogram them? It's almost like a cult.
Right. I 100% agree. That's the question, Katie, for the next 4 years. We can't be smug about it. We can't think that we're better or feel more superior than anyone else. But there are facts. And, we still live in a world of facts, not alternative facts. And I do believe fundamentally in the goodness of the American people to realize those facts. It's going to take a lot of education and a lot of patience and a lot of understanding from all of us on every side of this. But I totally think it's possible because once you have a president that's not pouring kerosene on the seams, I do think society starts to heal. And once you have a little bit of healing, you can have the space for more understanding.
And I guess, do you think that if Donald Trump, if something happens and he can't run for president again, or, his stature falls, do you think there will be another kind of a demagogue, if you will, that takes his place?
Well, I mean, if the Republican Party doesn't change, yeah, I just think it's an increasingly small percentage of the population. And I think Americans are going to wake up in a couple of years and be like, boy, what a nightmare that we went through, and not do that again. I think Trump will go down easily as the worst president in American history, not even close.
But
and I think it'll be recognized pretty quickly.
But the Republican Party has to figure out its soul and what it stands for and what it believes in and what it will support. So I don't know. Do you see anybody kind of a shining light who can say we have two political parties in this country and one isn't completely insane?
Right. I mean, you have some people like Senator Romney, I think, who are trying to stand, and then you have a bunch of people who've left the party. If the Republican Party stays the way it is, then I just think what happens is, that it becomes an irrelevant party and there'll be a new one.
I was just going to say, I wish Mitt Romney had never had dinner with Donald Trump. I think that kind of, after that speech he gave during the campaign, it really kind of, I think, took some of the wind out of his sails, or at least according to the way Trump characterized it.
Maybe, but I think that history will look very fondly on Romney's speech on impeachment. I think it's one of the best speeches in our lifetimes. And, and I think regardless of him, I think that, the party has to actually come to grips and find its soul. Otherwise, it's going to die as a party.
Yeah, especially as demographics and change in this country. They're appealing to a smaller and smaller base when you think about how the country is changing. By 2044, it's going to be a majority population. Although now it's very interesting what's happening to the Latino vote and the Asian vote. Anyway, we could talk about this all night, Neal. It's so fascinating. But thank you, Counselor. And I have to be honest when I tell you, please don't quit your day job.
Hey.
I appreciate the singing. Thanks for explaining this to us, and please keep us posted on what you see happening legally, because it kind of twists and turns. So I think it'll be interesting. My daughter is texting me about dinner tonight. Anyway, we've had all sorts of crazy things happen here today. Neal, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
If you guys like what you see, subscribe right here.